So my name is Joseph. Yeah. Sure.
You want to take on yourself? So this should be on the ears. And
This way.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, wonderful. Asonzeh, let's begin.
Good.
You're coming from Nigeria.
Yes, that's correct.
You lived in Lagos. You live in Lagos?
No, I did not live in Lagos, but I studied very close to Lagos, and periodically I'm there temporarily with friends and family.
Where does Lagos begin and where does it end?
Wow, that is a long, long question. Lagos, Lagos is a very interesting city.
Yeah.
As I've said yesterday, Lagos is actually the original name of Lagos is Eko, which is a town that originally owned by the Yorubas before the first Portuguese came in the 15th century and changed the name, and the name had a colonial background today because of where it is situated. It is almost completely surrounded by water, and Lagos has had a long history of colonial interpenetration, because for 77 years it was the capital city of Nigeria from the first amalgamation of the northern and the southern parts of Nigeria in 1914 under Lord Lugard, up until 1991 when the regime of President Ibrahim Babangida changed the capital city from Lagos to Abuja. So it developed political infrastructure, economic infrastructure, as well as social and educational institutions that made it what it is. It is still the economic capital of Nigeria, the concentration of wealth, the concentration of global players, companies, and service providers. As a matter of fact, most international companies actually begin from Lagos before they begin to spread out to other parts of the country, even to Abuja.
But it's also the concentration of population. So
it is.
Apart from Kinshasa, it's the biggest city of Africa.
As a matter of fact, it is the second largest city in Africa after Cairo. It is larger than Kinshasa.
So Cairo,
Lagos, Kinshasa. But when it comes to Pentecostalism, it is actually the capital of world Pentecostalism. There is no city that is like Lagos when it comes to the vibrance and the multicolor, the different hues of Pentecostalism.
This is a very interesting point of view. You said Lagos is surrounded by water.
Almost completely
surrounded by water. And there are some cities in the world which are surrounded by water, for example, Singapore. And once you mentioned that Lagos is like an apocalyptic city. And could you explain what is apocalyptic in this city?
In the sense, the use of apocalyptic city as a phrase to describe Lagos is actually to describe apocalyptic is really from the after effect of the scourge, of kind of religious scourge, which is recorded in the book of Revelation, when the angels of death visit a city and the city is almost completely wiped out. Then you see that it is a burnt out of its original self. It is not the original design. It doesn't have the vibrancy. It is not green anymore. It is gray, and it is the grayness is from decay and lack of attention, lack of management attention to the
but
city.
if you look at the revelation of St. John's, apocalyptic city also is situated near the water.
Exactly.
That means there's a sort of traffic, there's circulation of goods, there's circulation of population. There is a city in which you may not mark any space or any place. It's a fluid city.
It is fluid city. As the water flows, so also the city resources flow from one end to the other. So it is actually difficult to locate in terms of rigid, permanent space that belong. The spaces are very fluid, and interlocked or overlapping frequently. Lagos is what it is today because it is actually located next to the Atlantic Ocean. And as I said, 787 square kilometers of what constitutes Lagos is made up of creeks, lagoons, and lakes and such things. And because of that, goods actually came from the sea. And this was before before humans started traveling by aircraft and you see cargo planes. Before, it was really long haul ship kind of thing. And
so it's a city of transitions.
Lagos, yes. Lagos is we say it is a city of possibilities, and people transit. And why it is very, very attractive is that it is a city of ambitions. It is a dream city that you dream of getting well.
It's a good expression, dream city. But let me just remind that for you, Lagos is a certain inherited the apocalyptic city of the Revelation of Babylon.
Well, yes, one could actually describe Lagos having that characteristics, having the character. Apocalyptic city is also a city that is daring. It's a city that has experienced some hardship but survived it. It wasn't completely annihilated. So, in that sense, Lagos has gone through traumatic, experiences. It has gone through what characterized Lagos as it is that most people do not know is some kind of low-level, protracted political conflict over a long period of time between the federal government and the state government that left Lagos burnt out, and the kind of politics that is concentrated or structured around a patron-client relationship in which some big person emerges and is a center of resources. He corners much of state resources, and these are resources that should spread around in order to maintain the city, but it is concentrated in one person, in one locality, and such that the entire city is neglected.
So you know that in the Revelation of St. John, the opposite of Babylon is the eternal Jerusalem. Would you remind any city in the world which is just the opposite of Lagos? What would you say? It's Munich or it's...
No, Lagos does not have an opposite, actually. Lagos is a city of tensions. So it has the good, it has the bad, it has the scary part, much like any other city. But it depends on the degree of goodness or the good structure that you see. There is no city in the world in which it is particularly good. That would be euphoria. That would be some kind of a utopian city. And utopian cities cannot compare to real life, hard and fast kind of environment in which humans made of flesh and blood live, and there are antagonism, there are conflicts, cooperations, and competitions amongst different interests.
And since when Lagos is a Christian city? Since when, approximately?
Obviously, Christianity came to Nigeria. Let me just begin and see how please. Christianity came to Nigeria in two phases. Obviously, the first phase also came through Lagos, but didn't stay in Lagos, went over to Warri, and that was about the 15th century. And this was the Portuguese Catholic priests who came, and it didn't last because of so many things like court Christianity. They thought that converting the priest or the chief of a village amounts to converting the entire people, but over time it died out, and lack of manpower, the slave trade, diverted attention to cultivate this Christianity. But in 1842, Protestant missionaries came in through Badagry, which is a small town, a small city next to Lagos. It is actually part of Lagos City, but it is not mainland Lagos. And that was 1842, and it spread inwards. Now, Christianity didn't blossom. We didn't have this sort of socially visible Christianity that we have today up until after 1970. That is, the watershed was this Nigerian Biafran Civil War. After the Civil War, in 1970, January 1970, there was a kind of reconstruction that was going on. Also, the oil boom, the Arab oil embargo on the West caused the spike of oil prices, and Nigeria really reaped benefits from that financially, and embarked on expansion and development and building new schools and so on. And thereafter also, there was the importation of consumer goods from Europe, and that increased, like there was a growth of middle class and education, and people were really traveling about and everything.
But let me make just one step back. So the first Christians were Catholics, and
The first Christians were not Catholics; they were actually Protestants.
Okay.
They were,
Yeah, but
they were the Church Missionary Society.
But, within the Christianity, are there any conflicts, or were there any conflicts between Catholics and Protestants in Lagos?
Obviously, in Lagos, we do not have all-out conflict, but wherever you find competition, very strong, rabid competition, you have to see different levels of conflict. There are low-level conflicts. It's not open confrontational thing between the Catholics and the Anglicans, for example, or between the Catholics and the Protestants. But you could actually see that cooperation is very difficult because they do not agree. There are sectional interests. The Catholics want to protect their interests. The Anglicans want to protect their interests. And the Pentecostals, they don't even have a common Pentecostal interest. You know, they have individual Pentecostal pastors that behave like thieves. They just behave like emperors, building their own. They have their own specific interests to protect. So we keep finding, even amongst the Pentecostal cohort, we have conflicts, verbal conflict, abuses, that very often get into the media, and there are terrible interviews given by one pastor against the other. We do not find that amongst the Catholics and the Anglicans, for example. There seems to be some kind of mutual understanding. They could talk issues over amongst themselves, like the bishops could come together and discuss particular issues, and they've got an umbrella organization, Christian Association of Nigeria, that they present common front. In amongst the Christian Association of Nigeria, if the president is a Catholic, the vice president is an Anglican, and if the president is an Anglican, the Catholic. So they've got this kind of working arrangement, and gives them better understanding amongst themselves.
So your research project is on the relationship between urban structures on one hand side and religion on the other side, in a certain way. But before talking about just this this special project, I think in a certain way you're dealing also with the concept of fundamentalism. Could you define what is fundamentalism for you?
Obviously, I don't. Yes, my project is actually I work as a sociologist.
Yes.
Even though I am.
So, what is fundamentalism for a sociologist?
I do not use the concept fundamentalism because it is fraught with difficulties in the first place. But if I use it, it is simply self-referral to individuals who define that they had to pay strict attention to text. And the text defines orthodoxy, and but it is in contradistinction with modernity, with that which they reject. So fundamentalism here is the literal interpretation of certain texts, and very often it is also selective. It is not a holistic view of the text. It is picking those texts that support certain positions. Very often they are predetermined interests that the text support, and they put it forward in self-representation. So, and I know that it has been used and abused and misused in the media. So I'm very, very careful in my text, not to,
So, but this is the imperative character of the Bible, for example.
The imperative character of the Bible is that the Bible was not written for Germans or for Nigerians.
Yeah.
It was written, it came out from a particular culture. And except we really go to the background and to how it emerged, we will be taking the Bible out of context. And putting the Bible back into context means that we wouldn't say that God created the world in 6 days, for example. But now, being a fundamentalist is to insist, for example, that God created the world in 6 days. But what does 6 mean for a timeless God, God that does not have a 12-hour day, right? Yep. So they become the problematic, and that is why it is very difficult. And I say they are very selective. They pick those texts that they like and they support what they are doing, and they put it forward. There are those other texts like I call countervailing texts, which they ignore or push under the carpet that it is not relevant. So it is very often the way that individuals or groups self-select certain scriptural texts in order to buttress what they define as orthodoxy, and they do this in contradistinction to what they may term as heterodoxy or heresy, or those who are not who have deviated from some norms. So it is a kind of normative way of looking at it.
Yeah. So let's come back to your project. Your project on Lagos, and I think it's a very highly interesting research project. Which may have a lot of future in a certain way. So you are observing finally Lagos as a city of the future, even futuristic city, and the focus on your research project is something you yourself called religious industry, which is a certain aspect of economic but also of religious life in Lagos. What is religious industry, and could you describe it concretely?
Well,
for the listeners here.
Yes, obviously, religious industry, the way I have been using the term in the last 10 years, in the last decade, is the ways and processes in which religion is produced, circulated, and consumed. And here, my example is really studying religious spaces, sacred spaces, the production of sacred spaces. Sacred spaces are not neutral environments. They are environments invested with interest, invested with emotions, invested with money, as a matter of fact. And what many of my colleagues, many scholars of African religion or African Pentecostalism ignore, and for very good reasons perhaps, is the role of economics in religious transformation. That global prayers, for example, either it is a religious camp or religious site, does not run on prayers, it runs on money. So money, actually, the material resources determine the flows and the consumption patterns. So looking at religious industry is to see how religion has been commodified, have been structured in such a way that it can be packaged, it can be distributed, and it can be bought, as a matter of fact. It can be advertised. And the advertisement is much patterned after the advertisement of consumer goods, because religion has become, over time, a consumer product, consumer good in itself, in which somebody can tell you now that you can come to church A for deliverance of witchcraft, then you go to church C for prosperity. So you consume witchcraft deliverance in camp A, then you walk around to another camp to consume a different kind of product. Much in the same way in which you can tell somebody in Germany that, oh, go to Norma and pick a bottle of Coca-Cola, then you go to Lidl and you buy me a tin of tomatoes or whatever, because the two shops offer different things, and you pick and select, like a salad bowl. So
like in a supermarket.
Like in a supermarket, that's what I mean. A salad bowl, you find different things in it. You pick what you want, and the ones you don't want, you leave it aside. Next time you'll want something, you go over there, because obviously over time, and I talk about religious, looking at industry and looking at factory. By the way, I studied industrial sociology. So looking at all these things, you see how specialization of labor emerged in this, in which it is directed towards efficiency and quick production, mass production of goods. You can actually see those kind of examples in religious camps where there is also specialization. Different camps become, over time, they specialize in the production of specific goods. And they target specific market niches in order to cultivate.
So if I understood well what you wrote on this situation on Lagos, there is one, probably the biggest Christian enterprise, which is called the Redeemed Christian Church of God. And this church has built its own townships, or even cities. So can you describe what sort of enterprise this is? Who is the CEO of this enterprise? How does it function? How do they earn money, for example?
Obviously, the most popular religious site in southern Nigeria, if not the whole of Nigeria, is the Redeemed Christian Church of God camp called the Redemption Camp, which is 29 years old this year. And it is
the redemption camp means that you are redempted in the camp? Or?
Because I think the redemption part of it was simply a coin from the name of the church, the Redeemed Christian Church. So to get the now redemption, they just pulled it out from the name.
Yeah.
But also it can be used to say that Lagos is down, apocalyptic, and this camp is going to redeem.
So
Lagos.
we are back again in the apocalypse.
Yes. So that is actually the important thing why I say you can't understand the redemption camp without, first of all, cultivating the apocalyptic character of Lagos, which will now produce the sharpest contrast that possible and make you see the redemption camp, see it in the context of Lagos and see how Lagos is today and say that, it points to the redemption camp and everything. So the
redemption camp, in a certain way, is the eternal Jerusalem.
It is, well, the church members did not call it that themselves, but there is a way that it has been valorized. And when they say, and I've really had leaders of the church saying that this will be like the Mecca of Christianity, rather than saying this will be the Jerusalem of Christianity or the Rome of Christianity. They say it is the Mecca because every Muslim has got to go to pay pilgrimage in Mecca. And they said every Christian in the world will come to Nigeria, come to the camp. It becomes a global city. As a matter of fact, that is the ambition, and this is the aspiration of the people, and why there is this whole cultivation of infrastructure so that it will become like modern Jerusalem outside of either the Middle East and Western Hemisphere. It is Southern Hemisphere's Jerusalem city. And the new city, Jerusalem city, means a very secure city where God is present in a very superabundant way. You don't need to look for him.
And how is God present in this redemption camp, for example? How can he made present, for example, by architecture or by infrastructure or by even landscape?
This is actually interesting. In terms of the landscape, the city is properly laid out, right? The streets are almost on a straight line, so you could always see it. Using modern architectural design, you see that straight lines are the shortest distance between 2 points. So the streets are really laid out in blocks, in block form, and then the names of the streets are from biblical motifs. So you will see St. John Street, you will see James Street.
Not bad.
Sure. So it keeps telling you.
Is there Devil Street?
No, well, these are, they choose, I said also selectively, they pick the very positive names, nouns in the Bible, grace, miracle, and those things. But the important thing is also, you see that they've got what may appear as Christian iconography virtually all over the street, all over the camp. You see huge billboards, huge photographs with some with biblical verses pasted all over. So the environment is super saturated with all these images. In addition to that, there are loudspeakers mounted on the road that continuously rebroadcast the sermons of the leader of the camp. So,
may I, excuse me, a little question in between. I've heard that the most interesting medial device is the loudspeaker. Is it true?
Yes, it is, because even when you are in the toilet, you will be listening. And this is fact. When
preaches or music, or
you will be hearing either mainly the sermons, the preaching of the leader, but once in a while there is Christian music, soft Christian music,
gospels.
Christian gospels that reminds you where you are, of where you are, but that also saturates like Christian motifs everywhere. And one thing you cannot escape is the visuality of the leader of the camp. He is virtually everywhere when he is nowhere. So his voice is everywhere.
What is his function? Is a sort of bishop or what?
He has chosen a very simple title, the title of a pastor. Some call him reverend. He never refers to himself as a reverend. He never refers to himself as a bishop. And when I spoke with some of his lieutenants, and they said, if he can be a bishop, he will be an archbishop because he will be above every other person. So his title is the humblest of all titles, pastor. But he is actually the chief executive officer,
CEO.
The CEO of the camp, because the camp is not simply a religious side. It's also an economic side. It's also a political space, as I said. And because a lot of political activities take place there, a lot of economic presence you can't escape when you get to the camp. He is virtually the head. He is one of the leaders. Say he is the God we see now, and I quote him directly. So to some of the members, I wouldn't say all of them, they take him to be the voice of God amongst men.
May I ask simply some probably boring details? So how many members do have this redeemed church, Christian Church of God?
It is obviously difficult to. Statistics is very very challenging for many of these churches, and I take the kind of statistics that they provide. I take it with a great deal of caution because one, I know that it can be exaggerated, and it has always been so. In terms of specific congregations, distinct congregations, as at last year, the end of last year, the church has more than 22,000 separate congregations in 140 countries of the world. And this, about 60% or more, you find in Nigeria. Elsewhere, like in South Africa, they have more than 50 congregations. The majority of the congregants are Nigerians. In the UK also, they had very close to 300 different parishes. In all of them, the majority, more than 90% or thereabout, tend to be.
And is there a sort of class distinction? Is this which social class is member of this church, especially in Lagos?
Yes, it depends on which parishes. There are 3 distinct parishes in this church, 3 separate parishes, and they have separate demographics. So the membership in the classic. They have the classic parish, the classical parish, they have the model parishes, and they have the unity parishes. The classical parishes are the oldest that started about 1952 with the church. They are made up of very old, very poor, not so very poor people. The model parishes are the is the mega star, superstar club. So that is where you get, it is actually the moneyed members of the moneyed profession, the bankers, those in politics, high players, global players. That is where you find them in the model parishes. When you come to the unity parishes, you find a little bit of the classical parishes, a little bit of the model parish mixed together because the church founder wanted to create a unity of the two, the strengths of the two strands, put them together because these two were antagonistic of each other. This one was saying, ha ha ha, you look so poor. The other one said, you are not following the doctrine anymore. It's just, okay, let's create a third parish, a little of this, a little of this, we have a middle ground. So in some of the parishes you really see it is the mega parish. You see wealth, you see, one way of judging the quality of people is checking the car parks. If you check the car parks, look at the kind of vehicles you see, SUVs and Mercedes and all these, expensive cars. And when they come out, you will say these are really global players, these are political players, or these are really bankers. Because RSSU deals with raw cash very often. So it is the bankers club, obviously. So you get them there. And there are also parishes you find very humble, people of humble profession. They are really the struggling type, the manual workers and the artisans. And so it depends on where you are. In Lagos itself, Lagos is also diverse. There are the super club areas where you find Ikoyi and the highbrow areas. And there are also, if you keep going to the sides, the outskirts, the peri-urban areas, you also see parishes that are struggling. You know, they are in makeshift environments and such things. So you find it's not just one kind of people you see, and it depends on which parish, which part of the country you are in. If you are in Victoria Island, it is only the rich that you will find over there. If you move down to Surulere, you see the middle class, they're struggling, some movie stars also. And if you go to Ajegule, you find the parishes, you just find the daily workers, the struggling kind. So it is the location. But Redeem does not function very well outside the urban area. And what I say, and why I titled my presentation here, Worshipping the City, there is a Redeemed cosmology that is attached to the city.
So I think it's very important that you say this sort of Christianity or this sort of religion was created in big cities, in nearly apocalyptic cities, and you also formulated the thesis that it can only be observed as a certain relationship between religion, economics and politics.
Yes.
So what is the political impact of these churches in Nigeria?
The political impact of Redeem in Nigeria is actually very high, and this we haven't given it the right kind of attention in which we should. So we have to begin to really cultivate the political economy of Redeem. Redeem is highly political. That is sentence one. And the character, I remember sometime in 1999, the leader said, anybody who wants to be the president of this country must come and consult us. Which means you have to, and there seems since then, all the presidents, all the individuals that have become presidents in Nigeria, 3 of them, they have actually come to the camp before they became president.
But can you define some political positions? We in Middle Europe, we only know, for example, the discussions about homosexuality, for example, or campaigns against abortion, for example. But can you name some special political?
Obviously, it's not a political doctrine. In fact, there is no political ideology as such in which one could say that Redeem is conservative or not conservative. No, Redeem, the political, it has a kind of theology about the nation, that the nation will be, it is God's design that at a point Nigeria will be the most Christian nation, and that Nigeria will be one of the greatest nations in the world. It is the destiny of Nigeria according to how God has designed it. Consequently, over time, the leadership of Nigeria will be Christian and be Christianized. So there is, I've studied and listened to what Redeem has produced. They don't have distinct ideas about things. For example, Redeem officially condemns consumption of alcohol, which one could say ties into conservative fundamentalist theology. But Redeem also fraternizes with alcohol producing and distributing companies and everything. Its pastors work in breweries, and it collects money from breweries. So it's like there is a tension between the doctrine and the practice itself. This is the same thing that you find in politics. In his politics, the tension is that does Redeem condemn corruption? Officially, in his theology, corruption is bad. But Redeem benefits from corrupt politicians or fraternizing with corrupt politicians.
But let me ask one more point. For example, the evangelical Christians, for example, in the United States, they mix religion and politics by the notion of the promised land, a promised country in a certain way. Is this also valuable for Nigeria, that Nigeria is a sort of promised country for them?
Yeah, obviously for Redeem, Nigeria is a sacred space, completely. So you see the point. Nigeria is a sacred place, and I'm saying the way it ties in with America being conceived as God's own country.
Exactly.
And yes, America being conceived as God's own country. For Redeem, Nigeria is a sacred place. It is where God's intention is going to be worked out towards the end time. And they they class it that Redeem will be the instrument of the end times. That the popularity of Redeem, as presidents are coming to the camp, for example, to consult with the leader before getting into office, it means that Redeem is going to play increasingly more political role. But it's also a sign that the end time is here, that Nigeria will soon be Christianized, and Nigeria will play a greater role in evangelizing the larger world.
And is there any direct contact or relationship to United States? Because there's a very close relationship,
Yes,
it seems to be.
Yes, there is. There is a direct relationship between the United States and Redeem. And I would say Redeem specifically. I know that from 1979, the present leader, before he assumed office, during the lifetime of the founder, they started traveling to the United States, to Tulsa, Oklahoma. They were attending Kenneth Hagin's yearly program. So they were actually imbibing. And Kenneth Hagin, everybody knows, is also like the father of the prosperity theology. And everybody was really listening. And they were soaking in the doctrine. Over time, the Redeem started changing his own doctrine. But increasingly, the present leader, also when he's almost all the time in the U.S., the commodification of religion he learned from how it was done in the U.S. The way the way he decided to split the church, he learned from South Korea, Yonggi Chun's church. The way he did the Haus cell system, in which churches will hold certain activities in the homes, and rather than so that they could proselytize the neighborhood. And so he has been taking things from different parts of the world and putting them together. Now, if certain events are held in Nigeria, some American super pastors are always invited. If events are held in the U.S. also, he's invited over there to preach and to participate in. So there is increasing contact between the Redeem and the American.
And this leads to two last questions finally. The first question would be really a question to the sociologue. Probably you know the thesis of Max Weber concerning the link between Protestantism and capitalism. Would you say that especially in these cases, Lagos, but there are other countries in other cities in Africa where we have the same situation. Would you say that the thesis of Max Weber is confirmed in a certain way?
Obviously, the thesis of Max Weber is stood on his head. It wasn't confirmed. The thesis of Max Weber is that because these Puritans were uncertain about their salvation, they had to provide, they had to invent that the accumulation of wealth is a sign of salvation. It is accumulation, not consumption. But what happens in Redeem is not the production, but the consumption of wealth. So it is not actually, you have to accumulate and reinvest. Max Weber is that the Puritans accumulated, reinvested, and it grew. So capital expanded and production expanded. But in this case, we find that Redeem does not produce anything. It has banks and things that deal with money. It hasn't got any agricultural outfit. It hasn't got any company that produces
completely
goods.
Financial culture.
It is financial culture. It is embedded into the financial industry, which is a very troubling thing, if you wouldn't mind. So obviously, it is like a distortion of Weber's thesis. It doesn't confirm it, but distorts it. It deals with money. It doesn't produce it. It just keeps, finance, but like consumption, judicial use. You have to use it judiciously. You have to cultivate the interest rather than spending it. So it is not showing off, but it's not even involving in really big capital-intensive programs or projects and everything. But that of Redeem is different. They are not. There is no saving culture.
So this means churches and banks.
It is churches and banks, literally. That's why we've got about 4 different banks in the redemption camp.
And last question: if we think about the future of global cities, would you say that Lagos and what you described in Lagos would be a sort of focus on future developments?
Obviously, anybody who is interested in studying the future of cities in developing countries will pay attention to Lagos. Because Most other cities like Munich and Berlin, they have actually finished developing.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to further develop it. You have to maintain what you have. But in Lagos, you have to redevelop Lagos, and nobody knows the shape it's going to take, the momentum it's going to take,
Yeah.
and it depends on the available resources and the imaginativeness or creativity of the managers of the city, how it will take. So it could just take a different shape, and Lagos will increasingly, it is already playing a very important role in so many places. If you go to South Africa, you see the influence of Lagos everywhere. You go to Kinshasa, you see the influence of Lagos. There is no African city you go to today, you don't see it. Go to diaspora Africa, you see the influence of things produced in Lagos. Made in Lagos Guinness, I can get it in Munich, for example. So it plays a greater role, and the role will not diminish because it has the population.
And sorry for last question. Would you say that in these structures, that means religion, economy, and politics, maybe that Christian cities like Lagos and Islamic cities, for example, like Singapore, have a certain resemblance?
Yes, in a sense, they have a certain resemblance. They have a resemblance in which religion defines is a very strong identity marker, and you cannot suppress this in the city. No matter how you want to do with urban development or urban redevelopment, you have to take into consideration religious architecture. In fact, sacred spaces.
Okay.
You cannot just erase them because you want to develop. Whether it is Muslim sacred space or Christian sacred space, you have to consider them, and they have to be important landmarks in the way the city is structured.
Yeah.
Yes, increasingly, in this century, yes, religion will play a more important role in the design and structure and maintenance and management, as a matter of fact, of cities such as Lagos, such as Kinshasa.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.